a big one. Always I see bad ones.
Always?
Yeah.
But at least we get some good ones.
Always a bad one.
That's a bad one? Write 25 for me, would you?
Beans. Can I taste one of these beans?
Yes, you can taste them. Welcome back. These are my trellises to make you jealouses. I don't know if that exactly conjugates properly. Josh Sattin's design. I'll put a link to Josh's channel. He's got all kinds of cool stuff he does. We'll probably talk about this trellis system later, but I want you to see what's on these trellises. These are yams, but these aren't yams like sweet potato yams. These are true yams, DIOSCOREA species, and they're just one of 3 crazy root vegetables you should be growing if you're in zones 8, 9, 10, and beyond. This last week, my son wanted me to see Blues Angel Music in Pensacola, Florida. It is a really cool music store. So we loaded up the entire family and we went to this music store, which is actually probably really terrifying to the people that work there when a couple with 10 children come in. So we managed to break less than $5,000 worth of inventory. And on the way out, I saw something amazing. An Asian market. And I got these there. These represent 3 different species of root crops from the tropics, all of which I have hunted for since moving back to the States and have greatly missed. And we're going to talk about them one by one, starting with this weird guy in the middle. This is malanga. It's also called taro. It's also called dashin. And it's actually kind of a confusing root because there are multiple different species that get confused between dashin and edos. There are colocaceas, there is xanthosoma, and basically what they are their roots that make an elephant ear out of the ground. So you may have grown something like this in your ornamental gardens already. I remember the first time I bought what was called malanga from Publix and I planted the roots. I just bought all the roots that I didn't know from growing up. One day I said, I'm gonna plant this. Boniato? What's that? What's this one? Malanga? Okay, I'll plant that. And what's this one? Nyame? We called it name. Or they forgot to put the name in? Okay, I'm gonna plant that too. So I planted them all just to see what would come up. And I was so surprised to see this elephant ear grow. And I was like, those things grow next to church. I know people that grow those in their landscaping. I didn't know it was an elephant ear, but I was just a kid. So I asked my neighbor next door, who was from Puerto Rico, and I said, Eddie, Mr. Ramos, I called him back then. I said, what is this thing? He goes, oh, that's malanga, and he told me all about it. So in Hawaii, you might call it taro. Down in the islands of the Caribbean, you might call it dashin. And there are smaller versions that are called edos, but it's confusing and it's crazy, but they're super easy to grow if you have a warm enough climate. And as a matter of fact, Colocasia esculenta has escaped and established itself into the wild here and there. Sometimes you'll see it actually growing in the swamp. There is something you need to know about this, however, and that is, if you don't cook this root well enough, it will tear your throat up because it has oxalic acid crystals in it. When you cook it well, it's delicious. We really discovered how wonderful dashin was when we were down in the islands, and you cook it into a stew or a soup, and it has this amazing, it's like this creamy dumpling type of a texture. Almost, you would almost think you were eating chicken and dumpling type of soup, right? Like that kind of dumpling. This amazing, fine, textured, delicious dumpling. Gotta make sure you cook it well. And I think partly because of the oxalic acid crystals, I have never had any pest issues with this particular plant. Who would want to eat something that makes your mouth break out and feel like fire. I think the insects just go, you know what, I'm going to go over there and eat the neighbor's lettuce. So that's what I want to tell you about this one. Plant it in the warm season, when it's rainy, when it's not freezing, and harvest the roots when they get big enough to harvest. I'm not a pro at growing these. They've always been a kind of along the wetter areas of my yard or underneath as an understory. I planted them underneath bananas where the gray water system was running, and we would just harvest roots when I thought about it. There's a lot more that goes into proper high-level harvesting, but it is a perennial. Plant it somewhere, it will come back, and it's also a beautiful ornamental. In the islands, they would plant them right through the drains. Down on the island of Grenada, where I used to live, you would see drains behind the houses where they just ran out their water, and it would always be full of these. And they would often harvest the young leaves, cook the living daylights out of them, and make a soup called callaloo soup. Now, if you're from Jamaica and you hear callaloo soup, you're going to think amaranth. But down in Grenada, callaloo soup comes from this plant right here. This second root, which is a root I talk about all the time on my channel. If you're new to my channel, I'm going to apologize in advance because you're going to hear a lot about this root. This is a DIOSCOREA, a true yam. And I grow a lot of different varieties of true yam. I grow DIOSCOREA batatas, DIOSCOREA rotundata, DIOSCOREA pentaphylla, DIOSCOREA alata, and who knows, I got a few other ones. Some of them I'm not even sure of the varieties on. This particular yam is almost certainly a DIOSCOREA alata. This is the purple type. It's brilliant purple inside. These are pretty hard to find. In Asia, they are used to make colorful purple desserts, and it's probably the primary use for them. But we often use them just like you would use a potato. We skin them, chop them up, boil them, and when they're fork soft, they're ready. They also contain some oxalic acid, so you have to be careful and make sure you do that. It is a climber. It's going to climb over whatever you have. It's great on trellises that are made of cattle panels that you can put over your other beds. You can send it up trees. You can run strings into the trees. You can chop the tops off of trees to make living trellises and plant 3 or 4 roots around the bottom of them and just let them climb. They will cover the tree. I had a black cherry tree in my North Florida food forest project, and I planted some of the white DIOSCOREA alata at the bottom, and it grew all the way 60 foot up to the top of a black cherry tree with these beautiful leaves all around in the sunlight there. It was gorgeous. I found the purple variety to not be quite as vigorous, but it is still quite a climber. And it's very pretty. You could grow it just as an ornamental. It has a very strong growth season. It usually doesn't wake up until when things are really warm and wet. So probably you're going to see them coming out of the ground in March, April, May. Even down in the tropics, that's when they come out of the ground. But it's going to take longer if you have cooler weather and it's very dry. And it will grow vigorously through the hottest, wettest time of the year. Very few pest problems. It'll grow until sometime around November, and you'll see the leaves start to yellow and die back, and it will die back to the ground all on its own. But it is a perennial. What it's doing is it's gathering all those sugars and everything out of those leaves, packing it into the root beneath the ground, and then that root sleeps through until the next spring, when it will shoot a new vine up, consume the previous root, and make a brand new root that's even bigger. This is probably a 1-year yam. If you let them get to 2 years or 3 years, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. The biggest one I pulled out so far is 29 pounds, but that is by no means a record. They get much bigger than that. And it is an excellent survival staple. It's not sweet, it's starchy, it's rather like a potato. You could use it in any of that. And if you know the cooking of Southeast Asia, you'll probably have a lot more ways to cook it than we do. We're just kind of like meat and potatoes cooking it. Very simple, but it is a easy to grow carbohydrate, even in poor soil. This last crop is way more familiar to us in the United States than the other two that I just talked about. But this variety, either of these, is not what we're used to seeing. Normally, these would be orange, and they would grow in Georgia. But these are both varieties of sweet potato that are not particularly common. I've gotten varieties that are deep purple inside, varieties that are white, varieties that are white with a purple blush inside, varieties that are pink or red or dark like this on the outside with white interiors, and they have different flavors and textures from what you might be used to from getting a can of yams from the local Piggly Wiggly. These guys are going to go into my gardens, and to get them going, all I'm going to do is just plant them into the ground, and then as vines grow out of them, I will break off pieces of the vines and plant them through the understory of my grocery row garden system here. Just grow them like regular sweet potatoes, but know this, some of these varieties take longer to harvest. I grew a variety of Boniato from Central America, and it was a red-skinned white interior type, and it took so long to make roots compared to the orange ones because it was used to the tropics. I planted it in the spring when I planted my orange ones, and it got to the fall and I didn't have nearly as many roots as I did on the orange ones, and they weren't as big. It was just getting rolling. So some of these varieties have a longer season, and I just recommend getting a few roots, which is really cheap, of whatever ones you can get, plant them, and at the end of the year when you make your harvests, whichever ones you like, just keep some of those roots until the next season, or take some cuttings, put them in pots, and carry them on through. These are a great understory plant. They're not a climber like the true yams. These are the fake yams, the sweet potato, but they're an awesome ground cover layer for a food forest project, for around fruit trees, for your grocery row garden, or just in beds all by themselves where they don't disrupt anybody else's roots. I talked about propagation on the sweet potatoes already, but let's talk about propagation on dasheen. These guys can be divided when you have a plant, and the divisions can be planted in the ground. Just about any piece of root will grow. I'll stick this entire root in the ground. It does not like it when it's cold out, so it may not want to grow for you until it's warm, and it also likes it wet. So find a moist spot, or at least a well-mulched area, and plant this baby in the ground, a little bit underneath the ground, like about that much, and it'll grow just fine. And you can keep that plant and keep dividing off it, or harvest the side roots, or do whatever you want to with it. But this guy here I could probably cut into multiple pieces, but I like to plant them whole because I don't have that much faith that it will live. So when I have something like this, I just plant the entire thing. Small roots in particular we plant, and then the big roots we're likely to just eat in the kitchen. As for the yams, this top part here is called the head of the yam, and the Grenadians on the island of Grenada call this the food. However, all of this can be used for propagative material if you want, but if you notice, there are shoots growing up here on the head. This is where it would normally put a new vine out. It would grow in the ground like this. This part would put out the vines, and it would climb to the air. So if I just take this right here and plant it, I could take this and eat it. This part goes and gets planted again. I would put a little dusting of ashes on it, which helps protect it from infection. Got a little wood ashes in your fireplace or something, just dust it, or let it dry out just a little bit and then plant it in the ground someplace where it can climb. But I could also take the rest of this here, and I could get a few more plants out of it if I was short on planting material. Might take one like that. I could even probably divide that in two. If I get too crazy with them, I often take the pieces and put them in a big pot. And I'll just stick the pieces in the pot in spring when they're cut like this, some ashes on all the cuts, bury them a little bit beneath the surface, and then sometime in the spring when they start emerging and the vines start growing, they'll make new growth buds. Usually the head will shoot out first, and then growth buds will come out of these other parts. I carefully lift them out and transplant them to the final spot where I want them to go. And any ones that don't grow don't get transplanted. That way I can perfectly fill in the trellises to make you jealouses. As for sweet potatoes, pretty much you just gotta stick them in a pot or something in the spring and then break off the vines and plant them, or you can do what I'm doing this year, which is, because it's late, I'm gonna bury them right in my gardens and then let the vines grow out and break the vines off, and each vine will make a new set of roots for itself. Before we do that though, I want to see what the inside of this looks like because it's driving me crazy. What does the interior of this potato look like? It is so white. What does the interior look like? It is like a geode. Isn't that beautiful? That's definitely growing in the garden. That's a different color on your table, isn't it, than your traditional Thanksgiving? All right, let's see what the other one looks like. I haven't cut any of them open, so this is the first experiment here. And that is a white interior. We got a little bit of bleed over, probably from the yam and the other one, but dark skin on the outside, white on the inside. Really beautiful. God is quite the engineer, and I enjoy trying these different things and seeing the variation inside of the species. And if you have a garden and you want to grow extra roots and you've got a subtropical to a tropical garden, I highly recommend giving any of these or all of these a try. The Saigon market was where I got these, and they had a bunch of different roots. So if you live in the Pensacola area, go check out the Saigon market. It was a very nice Asian market, and they were very, very friendly to us, and we absolutely loaded up on condiments and sticky rice and all kinds of other stuff we couldn't get locally. I grow potatoes, I grow cassava, now I'm going to be growing taro / malanga again. I grow lots of yams, I grow turnips, I grow rutabagas. I am a root fiend. And being able to grow some of these tropical roots expands what we have in the garden. It means that our season goes longer. The potatoes are done in the spring and summer for us. And then we are on to getting sweet potatoes, and then we are on to getting true yams, and now we're going to be able to get taro as well. And it just makes for a more varied food supply. And if you can have systems in your garden of redundancy, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your roots in one basket. Get every kind of root that you can, because those roots are good filling things that you can eat when times get tough. We were very happy to have the root crops that we did during the pandemic when everything was getting locked down. We had all kinds of different root crops in the ground. If one of them failed, it wasn't that big a deal. We missed it, but we were right into the next season with the next thing. And having those kind of systems where one part breaks, but you've got another piece, and this part breaks, but you got another piece, or maybe you get some years when everything does awesome, is a lot of cheap peace of mind. Plus, if you're a plant geek, doing this sort of thing is just fun. So I highly recommend going and finding your local ethnic markets, Asian market, maybe even Publix, and growing some roots that you haven't tried before if you are in a climate that can handle it. Also, I want to tell you, if you have not seen it yet, the new edition of Create Your Own Florida Food Forest is now out. It is 330 pages, 200 illustrations from over 50 different artists, and it covers everything you need to know about growing an amazing food forest in the state of Florida. From North Florida to the Panhandle to South Florida to the Keys, this covers the entire state in detail with hardiness and plant profiles and everything you need. And it's really exciting to have it out. It's been 2 years in the making, and it is a complete, huge expansion and rewrite of the original little booklet I wrote years ago. So check that out. I will put a link below. And if you're not in Florida, check out my Grocery Row gardening book. And until next time, may your thumbs always be green.
Heart is pumping, the road flies by. Will we make it? We have to try. Chasing twilight with two high beams. Is this real or are you a dream?